What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Weekends with Yam, where I delight you on your weekend and we talk about motorcycles. It is such a nice time. Thank you so much for being here. Today we are talking about buying motorcycles, and not just buying motorcycles, but buying used motorcycles. Now, for a lot of you in the audience right now, you either have experience buying used motorcycles, maybe you've bought a project crap bike off of Craigslist, or maybe you're a new rider who's thinking about getting into it and you've been doing your research and you've found that buying a used bike is going to be your best bet. Today I'm going to give you some pointers and tips and tricks when it comes to buying a used motorcycle and what you can expect, and a couple of things you should be looking for whenever you do go and buy that bike. And at the end of the video, I'm going to talk about why buying a new motorcycle might make more sense than buying a used motorcycle depending on your circumstance. Now, I'm coming at this from a lot of experience buying bikes. I've probably bought, I don't know, 35 different motorcycles. I've kind of lost track of how many bikes I've bought. It doesn't even feel like a major event to me anymore, which is nuts. So I've bought brand new from a dealership. My Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled was such a machine. It's not so nice and new anymore. I've bought lightly used off a dealership. My race bike, my 675R, was purchased as a basically bone stock 675R from a dealership. I've bought an absolute crap bike off Craigslist before, the Hensai Hornet back in 2018. I've bought a nice bike from a private seller. Our giveaway MT-09 was such a bike. And I've also bought a motorcycle off a friend of mine, which is my 250 dirt bike. So I've got a lot of experience with this, and the one thing I want to tell you is that every used bike is going to be a risk. No matter how you slice it, no matter how you dice it, every used bike is going to be a bit of a risk. But taking some of the steps we're going to talk about today is going to reduce those risks. So, if possible, the first thing you should do is buy from someone you know. Buying from someone you know is going to reduce your risks, because if something goes wrong, well, you know the person, right? If you find out that the chain blew up on you, or the tires are in terrible condition, or the bike starts leaking oil, if you bought it off your buddy, you can literally just text them and say, hey dude, what the hell's going on with this, right? It's not to say that they're going to answer you and maybe they're going to not help you out or something like that, but it's a lot more likely if you buy from a friend of yours that that friend can help you in case stuff goes wrong. So if you do know a friend of yours that is selling a motorcycle, or a friend of yours is willing to sell you their bike, that's probably going to be a pretty good bet and a good place to start. If it's your very first motorcycle, definitely bring someone along with you to take a look at that bike. You're not going to know all the ins and outs of a specific model or things to look for when you're buying a used bike for yourself. So it's definitely best to bring someone who knows a little bit more than you, just so they can have a second pair of eyes and definitely spot some of those things you may not notice. You might not notice a cracked coolant hose, or maybe a leaking spot of oil, or maybe the throttle is just a little bit, not that great. Maybe one of the throttle cables is snapped. There's so many things that could be wrong with the used motorcycle. It's definitely best to bring a second pair of eyes. Here's my hard and fast rule when it comes to buying a used bike. You don't want to get anything older than 5 years, and you don't want to get anything that has more than 15,000 miles. I know a lot of people are going to think that's a crazy rule, but that is just my personal rule that I live off of whenever I'm buying a used bike. I don't like to buy any used motorcycles that don't meet either of those criteria, and ideally fall under both of them. So I'll give you a great example. The MT-09 that I purchased as a giveaway bike for this channel was a 2019 MT-09, had about 3,000 miles on it, and it falls under the rules that I just mentioned. It's less than 5 years old and has less than 15,000 miles. You might think that that's a pretty hard rule to find, but to be honest, motorcycles are really different than cars if that's where you're coming from. Most people buy them and they don't really spend a whole lot of time riding them. They buy them as recreational toys, they sit in the garage for a long time, and they just kind of collect dust. So it's actually pretty easy to find a lot of good motorcycles that fall under both of those rules, and you shouldn't settle for something that's like 15 years old and has 20,000 miles. I know this might sound a little bit weird, but another shorthand that I use when I'm buying a motorcycle off someone else is to buy it from someone who's a little bit older. I like to see a motorcycle that was owned by someone in their mid-40s, maybe a 50-year-old guy or girl, and that just, to me, gives me a little bit more peace of mind knowing that the bike was probably not hooned around. That's not to say that there aren't 45-year-old hoons out there. There definitely are, and I have met some of them, but it's much less likely for a motorcycle to be owned by an older person and have been hooned. So definitely look for that whenever you're looking at a used bike. Another really quick and fast rule that I use when I'm looking at used bikes is looking at the tires. Tire life can tell you so much about what a bike went through, what someone did with the bike or didn't do with the bike. It tells you so much about how the motorcycle was used. If you see a tire that has the profile a little bit squared off, you know that that bike was probably commuted with, or maybe someone just liked doing big pulls with it. Or MT-09 was kind of like that. It was squared off and kind of looked like a trapezoid. If you see a motorcycle that has those telltale track day signs, maybe those boogers right at the edge of the tire where it's picked up rubber from a track, or you see really aggressive signs of wear and tear, you know the bike probably lived a bit harder of a life. Now, race bikes and track bikes typically are going to have that, and that's what they were designed to do. But if you see that on a more street biased motorcycle, you're gonna know that it was ridden pretty hard and aggressively. That might not be a deal breaker for you, but it's just something to know when you're looking at a used bike. Looking at the tires are gonna tell you a lot about the bike. Also, looking at the bike's chain condition is gonna let you know a ton of how the bike was cared for. If you see a rusty, mismatched, kind of wonky chain, you know that the owner probably didn't care much about the motorcycle. Again, that's not a deal breaker. You can get a new chain on a bike and it's really not that big of a deal. It's just something to think about whenever you factor it into the cost of the bike. If you're getting a good deal, but you gotta get new tires and a new chain, all of a sudden that bike might be $500 more expensive than what you budgeted for. Look for leaks all through the bike. There are lots of places that a bike could be leaking. You could have leaky fork seals right at where the suspension works at the front of the bike. You could have a tire that doesn't hold air that's technically a leak. It's an air leak. You could have oil leaking out of the bottom of it. You could have a coolant leak. You could have a brake fluid leak. There's lots of different types of fluids on a motorcycle that could be leaking, and the bike you're buying should, in theory, not be leaking anywhere. So definitely take a look for anything that's leaking on the motorcycle. Gas too. You don't want any gas leaking on your bike. In my opinion, don't try to go for a bike that's sat outside for too long. This is going to be a really common thing you'll see if a bike's been sitting outside. It's going to have signs of rust on it, a little bit more wear and tear. It's just accelerated the life of this bike a little bit, in my opinion. You should definitely try to find something that's been maybe garage kept, or at least parking garage kept, just a little bit away from the elements, maybe the cover on it. There's no reason that a 4 or 5 year old motorcycle should have rust all over it, but it's again not a deal breaker. My race bike that I bought off the dealership had a couple signs of rust. It definitely sat outside for a little bit, but that didn't mean it was a bad bike. It's been living a good, useful life for me for almost 2 years now. In my opinion, small scuffs and signs of wear and tear is actually not a big deal, especially if this is your first or second motorcycle. I don't think it's a deal breaker if a bike's been sort of tipped over on its side or something like that. What you don't want to see though is extreme signs of crashing or of serious damage that's occurred to this bike. Now, most motorcycles that you're going to see for sale are not going to have super extreme frame damage or serious signs of crashing. And if a seller is a decent person, they'll let you know whether that bike's been down or not. For example, I am currently in the process of selling my RC390, and I had to tell people that it has been down at the track because it is a track prepped motorcycle and I'm a decent human being. But if you're seeing on this motorcycle some signs of serious damage and they're not disclosing to you that it was crashed or went down at some point, definitely walk away from that deal. Again, go back to that 5-year or 15,000 mile rule I was telling you about. People are selling bikes for all kinds of different reasons nowadays. We're in the middle of a recession. Some people have to sell them to make ends meet. Some people are trying to get new bikes. Some people are just clearing out space in their garage. There's all kinds of reasons why someone would sell a bike, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad motorcycle. Now, when it comes to buying new, I do recommend that beginners try to get a used motorcycle, but if you want to buy new and you have a decent credit score, interest rates are pretty good right now, and chances are you can head down to your local dealership and they can finance you a bike with little to no money down. There's a lot of benefits to this. Number one, you're getting a motorcycle that is brand spanking new, has a warranty, it's ready to go, it's fresh. If you're buying one of the Japanese Big Four kind of motorcycles, nothing's gonna go wrong with it. It's pretty much gonna be bulletproof. But the thing to consider is that buying a new motorcycle is going to be more expensive. You're gonna be required to carry a certain level of insurance depending on where you live. You're also gonna be financing the machine, so interest rates is gonna add cost of ownership. And overall, it's just gonna be a bit more expensive. But in my opinion, if you are concerned about the worry of buying a used motorcycle and it mechanically running well, definitely go and buy new. I would say that anything under 5% interest is fine. I'm not a personal finance guru, but I just feel like it's definitely well worth it to pay a very small premium to have a brand new motorcycle with little to no money down and get yourself riding pretty much immediately. I think that's pretty awesome. I bought my very first motorcycle brand new. I got a decent deal on it, but I sold it, and so I kind of lost a little bit of money on it. But overall, I think if you do it sensibly, you can definitely get it done really, really well. So guys, that's my wisdom on buying a used motorcycle. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. If you want to keep this conversation going, you can always join us down below on yammynoob.co on our Discord server. I chat with our members literally every day about this sort of stuff. People always lob questions over to me and ask me whether they should get this bike or that bike. I ask them, stuff about themselves, and we kind of figure out what bike would make sense. If you've been shooting me over a DM or a comments in the YouTube section, I try to respond to as many as I can, but to be honest, we have so many members on our Discord server now that it's kind of difficult for me to respond to those Instagram messages or those YouTube comments. The most reliable way to reach me is through our Discord server. So check that out below. We've also got a brand new member meetup feature on there that we are piloting out. You can find all other Yammie Noob members across the world and make yourself a group ride with them and meet up and hang out. So it's a great way to meet new riders as well if you're into that whole thing. Catch you guys in the next one. See you later. Oh, hey, you're still here. I can't believe you made it to the end of the video. Not many people do. Just for you, I have a little treat. Hit this link over here. Check out the next video on the Yammie Noob catalog. What's gonna happen in it? I don't really know. Maybe there's a boost in it. Maybe there's some cool wheelies. Maybe there's some fun memes. Probably. Who can say?